I want Magdrive to be the biggest company of the 21st century. And so does Thomas. And we tell that to investors. They're not the right investor for us if it puts them off. I'm Mark Stokes, co-founder and CEO of Magdrive.
What do you do at Magdrive?
We're developing next generation satellite propulsion for low Earth orbit satellites and deep space transport.
That, for myself and most founders, is so far out there. So how did you get into this, and what exactly does that mean?
I'll give you like an example of what it means, where the industry's at, and then how we got into it. So at the moment, for moving your satellites around, you've pretty much got two options. You can either use chemical thrust, which gives you a lot of thrust, a lot of push, but it has really bad efficiency. It's got terrible miles per gallon, if you like. And it's also really heavy, and the chemicals they use are just awful. Like the most popular one, hydrazine, is literally a neurotoxin. So like if you look at it funny, it'll kill you. On the opposite side of this, you've got electrostatic options, which really are the inverse. They give you very little thrust, but they're super efficient at what they do, and they're usually lighter. Problem is, industry has ambitions that these propulsion systems can't solve. They want a system which is high thrust and operates at a high efficiency, high miles per gallon. And that's exactly what we're building at Magdrive. We're building the first of its kind next generation that isn't just going to replace what's already out there, but is actually going to enable all the really cool stuff that a lot of very serious people at very serious companies want to start building. They want to start what will be the first steps to orbital manufacturing and asteroid mining. And it all starts by improving the way we can just move around in space. I should clarify, this isn't to get into space. This isn't a launch vehicle, the type of which SpaceX are doing. This is for satellites which are in Earth's orbit. So we got into this by thinking very blue sky, to be honest. Me and my co-founder, Thomas, we met back at Imperial College in 2017. And we always talked about, running our own companies and how space is just one of those areas where you want to work. Everyone gets crazy excited about it, and people get really enthusiastic and want the next thing to happen. So we thought, okay, how do we make that next thing happen? And what is the next thing? And because, we're pretty heavy sci-fi fans, we thought, well, how do we make Star Trek happen? What are the bottlenecks to make Star Trek happen? Now, that's a big way off, obviously. But one of the areas we had in mind was satellite propulsion. It's really hard to kickstart any kind of space age economy or even just new space age ideas if you're limited to basically using like a biplane or one of those really early Wright brothers kind of plane. We need the equivalent of a jet engine to make all this work. And we started off talking about a lot of our different ideas in space, and we settled on this one because Thomas called me up one day and he said, Mark, you have to have dinner with me. I've got to tell you about this amazing idea I've had. And he was so excited because he'd essentially done the numbers on what was a single stage to orbit reusable launch vehicle, which is kind of the holy grail of space travel. Current rockets, they're just about becoming reusable. Or maybe they'll become single stage to orbit soon enough. But the idea of having something that's reusable, that's single stage, and this was something that would be entirely electric as well, and also would give you 20% payload capacity. Now, you look at anything that's ever been launched, even SpaceX's or Ariane's or anyone's best efforts, only 5%, maybe 5.5% is what's actually on the tip of the rocket that's actually going into space. The rest of it's just getting it there. So when he said 20%, I thought, that's insane. We'd love to work on this. Obviously, that is a massive undertaking, which two people who've never run a company before shouldn't probably take on as their first company build. So we approached it instead from an engineering point of view. How small can we make this? And when we looked into the plasma physics and mechanical engineering into what we'd have to do, we realized we could make something small enough that we could build that would be amazing for satellites right now, let alone in 5 years' time when there will be almost 10 times the number of satellites up there.
So it sounds like there's quite a few moving parts to this. Obviously, for this industry, the knowledge you need is so expansive. in terms of just the physics behind how you get the engines to move and everything else, but also the elements of space that you need to understand there. On top of that, as you say, you've then got the business side of things in terms of knowledge of running a business. And on top of that, obviously takes massive funding for projects like this. So talk me through how you're approaching each one.
On the first one, on the knowledge of space, we thought that initially, we don't know anything about space itself, but once you start talking to people who are in it, it's actually much more diverse. You've got electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, physicists and scientists working in all different disciplines. And to think that anyone has a handle on everything is just not correct, really. So we found that even though none of us have worked in space before, one of our recently joined team members has, and that's extremely valuable for us. But overall, we're working on an engineering system which interfaces with well-established technology. So there's a slight, you get cut a slight break there, really. However, in terms of understanding the rest of the industry, yeah, there's a lot to learn there. Exactly how it all operates, realizing that there are thousands of small players and that the industry has changed a lot from what people might expect it to be maybe 10, 15 years ago, where big companies did everything. Now they act basically as aggregators. They buy everything in, like literally everything: power supplies, propulsion systems, telecoms, antennas, little onboard computers, absolutely everything. And then they just put it all together. So the industry is really horizontal in that way, which is fantastic. It's a great place to be, especially as a startup. You're in great company. But then on the market side of things, yeah, it's a really unique industry. Its own very specific ideas, legacy ideas, and all of this really we educated ourselves on by networking, by meeting as many people as we could, and I like to say impressing the right people who've become our advisors. And they've been absolutely amazing in teaching us everything very specific about this industry, which in some cases is very much a buyer's market. In other cases, it's very much a seller's market. Understanding what our place in that market would be and what the customers are looking for, very much so, and what they would do with our kind of technology. On running the business side of things, I think the most valuable thing for us there has been both the accelerators that we've been through and the incubation centers. So we were part of the Westcott Business Incubator, and we're currently part of the European Space Agency Business Incubator. And they run a lot of events and a lot of workshops to educate you about this. Quite a few companies who come to these programs have some relevance to space, but we are absolutely right in the middle of it. And with what we want to try and change, we need to know everything there is to do with it. But we were also part of the Entrepreneur First Accelerator, which brings startups to that point where they can take on seed funding. And those guys were really useful in terms of just how to run a company, let alone space. I leave space aside because there were guys there running all kinds of companies, software, other hardware guys. And there's just so much which is vital to understand. It's just the really even mundane things. Like I was waking up in a sweat because I thought, oh shit, I'm going to commit tax fraud in my sleep accidentally one day. So we need to get accountants, and then we need to get a lawyer. I don't know anything about talking to accountants or a lawyer, but I had to learn that, and they were there to demonstrate that it's actually quite easy if you do it this way, and this is how much time, how much money you should be putting into it, and how to maximize your time and your money as well, which is, I think, really important for everyone running a company.
Absolutely. And as you're getting this business going then, so you've now got a team around you, you've secured some funding. How has life changed, I suppose, for you as the founder? How's your role changed within the business?
It's changed quite significantly, really. For me and Thomas, my co-founder, we started off with very much of an overlap of what we were doing. The idea of being CEO and CTO of a two-man team just sounds ridiculous. It still sounds kind of weird to me now that we're six people. But we did a lot of the same stuff together. We put together our technical and commercial roadmaps together. We did all the budgeting together. We talked about how we would approach investors together, setting up accountants, legal stuff, all that stuff, as well as learning more about the space industry. It's something we've both got to know a lot about. Then things started to change a bit when we got into more of the company building side. Thomas built the prototype parts of the Magdrive in his spare room at the time during lockdown, which is something I wouldn't have been able to do. His knowledge of pulse power electronics and plasma physics was absolutely key then. And I exercised my like for talking to people and talking a lot about what we're doing and why it's awesome and why everyone should get psyched. So when it came to talking to investors, it made more sense that he took the CTO role and I took the CEO role. And yeah, in the investor conversations, I think having CEO and CTO positions was very important because there is an expectation that the CEO will talk more and take the lead, while the CTO will back up any technical questions, which was really useful because Thomas was able to take notes on how I was doing. And then afterwards, he'd tell me, you messed up that question. Oh, you really screwed that one up. Like, they didn't understand. Like, you weren't looking at their faces because they were blank. So I was able to improve that a lot over time. So, I mean, that really was the second stage. And now that we're into the third stage where we have the money, where Thomas is able to really leverage his role as CTO and manage the team and build the technology up. I've taken on a lot more of the company building, I guess, branding, reaching out to future customers, cash flow. Oh my God, cash flow. Always the need for more money. Grants, happy to say we're very happy with our investment at this point, but there's always opportunity for more grants, more collaborations, learning more about the industry and folding that into the company, checking that the roadmap is still there, writing up reports for our grants, attending conferences. It's been really busy and really hectic. So it's really moved through those three stages, and our roles have become far more differentiated by now. We used to say things like, you should handle this as CTO or you should handle this as CEO. And that was always code for someone else will expect the CEO to do this, or they'll expect the CTO to do this. Whereas now it's much more entrenched. It's much more a split between commercial things and technical things. As much as I still love to be in the lab, my background and my heart is very much as a mechanical engineer. So whenever the guys want some hands-on technical unskilled stuff, like hold this for me, I'll do that. I'll be there. But I know that's not my full-time job.
Perfect. Well, it sounds like you've done a great job as co-founders on, one, defining each other's strengths and really leaning on that, but two, also giving the honest feedback to each other that you mentioned. So that's always really good to hear. I'd love to hear a bit more around the journey you've had with gaining investment so far. And again, just with the depth of knowledge it takes of space, of running a business, the amount of funding it's going to take. So what was it like approaching investors, and were there any key learnings from that?
Absolutely. It's worth mentioning here. We did get a head start on this by being part of the Entrepreneur First Accelerator program. You do a video with them, you do a demo day where you meet like 24 investors, like VC groups, and something like 100 angels as well. So you get a crazy head start on that. But the important thing there was that we didn't just meet the investors that we wanted to meet. We also met the investors who, to be honest, we probably wouldn't have sought out in the first place. When you do your research on them, we saw that they were doing software as a service, for example, or fintech. Now, some of them still reached out to us. And at that point, we put together a plan around basically using them as cannon fodder. But we rank them 1 to 4, right? 1 is your deep tech investors, have done space before, have guys working with them who've done it themselves. And then on 4 is just like, no idea about space. They're talking to us because it sounds cool, or because their kids will probably think it's cool. So we use them as cannon fodder. We try out answers on them. When they ask, what valuation are you looking for? You say, higher than what you're offering. And you see how that goes down, and it doesn't go down very well, actually. But we didn't know that at the time. So when I was talking about how Thomas would tell me how I'm doing, that was so useful because we tried out all our answers with them, basically like rehearsing. So by the time we came around to speaking to the 1s and the 2s, we were just so polished, but also really natural as well, which is really important. And it was really important to identify those VCs, and really important to leave the 1s and the 2s till later in the timeline, really later in the plan. But what really came through of what they're looking for is quite multi-layered and very multi-level, really. I feel like a lot of VCs want to be impressed, but are very guarded against feeling impressed. So you've got to explain this, especially the space industry, which is an area which you don't really dip in and out of. VCs are very keen on it because it's exploding massively, but their knowledge is not quite there. So alongside having to explain the market and the industry, an element of what we do involves having to explain orbital mechanics and how things move in space, how it's just completely different from Earth and what that means for our product. A lot of VCs at that point bow out. It's not for them. They can be very honest, which is what we appreciate. They say they don't have much to bring to our company, therefore. But the ones who do, they might go away and do some extra reading. They appreciate the way we can explain it in layman's terms and in a technical sense, which is again a combination of what me and Thomas are both good at. They're the ones who always come back to us and want to learn more. Ultimately, we got into a conversation with our number one, or our number zero, if you like, which is Founders Fund, who were very early investors in SpaceX. So not only have they invested in space before, they also have guys there who have done it themselves, who've been part of space startups, who've got real hands-on experience in space hardware as well. So they were absolutely perfect for us. Plus the fact that something which is quite unique to us, maybe to our industry, is firstly that revenue is a long way off. This is a capital intensive project, and we're not going to have anything on the shelves by the end of this year. So investors have got to be okay with that. And the best way to approach that is to be upfront. And they might say, cool, no thanks, bye. But they might still be interested. But the second thing is what our vision for the future of the company is. We don't want to sell this. We want to be running Magdrive until we're old and we die. And I don't ever want to retire from this job. I don't ever want to sell it. I don't want to license it. I want Magdrive to be the biggest company of the 21st century. And so does Thomas. When we tell that to investors, they're not the right investor for us if it puts them off. If they want to start talking about exits, if they want to start talking about, what kind of liquidity events, like that kind of stuff. It's like, no, we say it up front. We say that that's our goal. That's our mission. And for an investor to turn around and say, oh, yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, we're on board. That's great. That's rare as well. But another reason we like Founders Fund, they've invested in SpaceX. And as far as I know, they haven't had a chance to recoup their investment yet. So that's, again, a great combination of their outlook that matches ours, which I guess is another factor in choosing your whole 1 to 4 element, choosing who you practice on. But seriously, like practice on the ones which you wouldn't mind losing.
Yeah, that's great feedback and really interesting for a lot of founders in the same position. So what are some of the goals then for the next sort of 12 months? You said that there's not going to be a product on the shelf per se this year. So what does this year look like, and what does it look like once that product is ready?
Sure. So this year is all about getting an engineering model on the bench, basically. Having it tested in a vacuum chamber, all the components work. It's looking like a very attractive option for customers in the industry. And that's a very customer-oriented goal for us. Reason being is whenever we've spoken to future potential customers, whether that's big industry players or smaller guys, they all want to see something of that level technologically that's done and it's ready, and we can show them and they'll go, oh, wow, holy shit, that's amazing. So that's a very customer-oriented milestone that we want to get in place so that then we can agree on doing an in-orbit demonstration with a future customer. We can do on ourselves. We can just put it on a rocket. There are launch sites opening up in Scotland, which are going to be super useful. But there's so much more to it if you can partner with another company. And that means you do a co-technology demonstration, a co-business demonstration. What they get out of it is basically being first in line. We've had to integrate the Magdrive with their satellite platform before anybody else, which means that we can start manufacturing for them immediately. But also, they get to be the ones who say, oh, we've pulled off this first ever thing. We're the first guys to do, sustained operations in very low Earth orbit. We're the first ones to do sustained long-term satellite rendezvous. We're the first ones to do an orbital inclination change of 25%. And that's hugely valuable for them. Obviously, it's insanely valuable for us. So it's all building towards gaining that flight heritage, which is a way of de-risking everything about what we're doing, which is really crucial in the space industry. There's There are smaller companies which are less risk averse, but larger companies, it's a bit hit and miss. Some of them are a little more willing to take a little risk. Some of them are really not willing. So we've really got to de-risk all of this so that we can start doing really awesome things with the people who really matter.
Really interesting. And for those listening, where can they find out more about both yourself and Magdrive?
I think the best way to do that is I mean, this is going to be really cool to say, but if you Google Magdrive, there's going to be a lot of stuff, which feels really awesome now. Wasn't the case a year ago, but you'll find our website where there's more on that. We post quite a bit on LinkedIn, a few articles about what we're working on as well. But I think looking into anything to do with recent satellite news, particularly the way that the way the industry is booming, is a fantastic way to go as well. There are a lot of materials out there on different types of propulsion systems as well. There are a lot of good materials out there. No doubt there are fun educational YouTube videos as well. The reality is that the space industry is very open to people who want to learn more about it. It's a very collaborative space. It's a very inviting space as well. But if you Google Magdrive, I'm not going to complain at all.